And welcome to this Hump Day edition of the Chiefs, our Wednesday edition of the Chiefs. With us, of course, are Luchi Cruz Valdez, the head of News 5. Hi, bossing.
I am.
And joining us in a while will be Ana Marie Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of Philippine Star, and Robbie Lampay of One News from Reliance Street in Mandaluyong. Good evening and
Hi,
happy
good
Hump
evening.
Day.
Yes. but okay, so what are the headlines?
Yeah,
You know
what
what
are the
I'm
headlines today?
noticing? Yes, you know what I'm noticing for a while. For a while, we stopped talking about COVID because of the typhoons, no? But now we're back to
Yes,
talking about COVID, and
we're
the
back to COVID
headlines
mode.
are mainly about COVID now because of the threat of another surge, right? So, yun talaga.
Mm-hmm,
And,
mm-hmm.
and and of course the debate about whether to allow children in the malls should end tomorrow when the
Mm-hmm.
mayors decide whether or not to allow them. Pero well, that's the
Yeah.
debate.
And the never-ending discussion about COVID-19 vaccines. Everybody always wants to get a new update on when
Yes,
we are going to get those vaccines. If you do remember,
yes.
yung AstraZeneca vaccine that the
Oh,
private sector was supposed to have gotten
yes.
as a first batch, supposed to come in
Right,
May.
right.
Mukhang magkakaroon ng kaunting problema because AstraZeneca is going to have another set of tests.
Oh,
They want to
because
conduct a new set of tests kasi remember, di ba,
FDA.
hindi pa FDA, the AstraZeneca itself. Kasi
Yes,
remember, their first efficacy rate was 62% with two full doses.
with two full
And
doses.
yes,
Yes.
and then they only made the mistake with the small group, 1,200 or 1,800 people, na nabigyan nila ng half dose and full dose. And that gave them
Mm,
90%. and
yes.
uh, and people are saying, "Teka, that's such a small, such a small population. I mean, your test group
Oh, compared
was
to
such a small
Pfizer, di
population.
ba?
Yeah,
Compared
30,
to other
40,000.
pharmas. Yes.
So they are a
Oh,
bit under fire because of that. So they decided to conduct a new round of tests. This time with the half dose, full dose formula.
right. Actually, the whole idea of the vaccine being rushed like this, di ba,
Yeah,
is
scary.
really, no, it is really casting doubts on the vaccines themselves, especially as far, not just as far as the efficacy, but as far as the side effects, no, because now, and epidemiologists, researchers, scientists are basically comparing this vaccine to the TB vaccine, to the polio vaccine, to the chickenpox vaccine, which took all of something like 20, 30 years to test, no, and develop. So parang
Mhm.
now the pharmaceuticals are under tremendous pressure. And as you said in your explainer the other day, on Frontline, di ba, the fact that these rich nations have in effect invested, they have
Yeah, they
advanced the
over ordered.
money for, yes, no, for not only that, you said correctly that they have advanced the money for these vaccines to be developed. So the
It's
pressure
investment, di
is
ba?
really great, yes, for them to produce results, but at the cost of what? I think yun yung question mark. So medyo nakakatakot.
Mhm. Hey, Robbie Alampa is here with us. Hi, Robbie.
Hello,
And
magandang gabi po.
yeah. And just to manage
Magandang
expectations,
gabi.
kasi gines namin kanina sa STL si Dr. Tony Liachon, and we asked him again kung meron siyang updates
Oh,
dun sa timetables. Ang kanya, the earliest that we could have the vaccine, sabi niya, I mean for implementation will be third quarter pa talaga. Sabi ko, so what's all this talk about first quarter, second quarter? It turns out that when they say first quarter, second quarter, that's the time when our FDA may have given already approval. That's not necessarily the time when
Mm.
the vaccine gets here and is on roll. That's a different timetable altogether. So just to manage expectations, kasi people might say na, oh, by first quarter, the FDA may have already got given go signal. Kasi meron ng emergency use authorization na pinirma ng Pangulo
Mm.
for
Mm.
approval in 21 days. So that speeds up the
Mm.
authorization, but that does not necessarily speed up the arrival.
Iba yung logistics concerns.
Iba yung logistics.
And for that matter, the supply concerns. Kasi ayun nga,
Yes.
sa supply, you're also highly dependent on how much of it will be, well, let's not say cornered, but basically will go inevitably first to the developing countries that produce these. And then yun nga, hiwalay pa yung supply, hiwalay pa yung logistics.
Yeah.
So just to manage expectations siguro kasi people like to throw the months around Parang, uy, malapit na pala. And remember, we're talking about a 3 to 5 year period of vaccination. We're not talking about 1 year lang. 20 million per year.
Yes.
So baka tayo, kailan pa?
Kasi yun nga, pinag-uusapan kasi ngayon is efficacy, di ba? And to a certain extent, they're also vouching for safety with regards to side effects that they can monitor. But remember, this is what they can monitor just for a few days, for a few weeks. Then there are a lot of questions. Now, we keep asking, for example, let's say pregnant women, you're gonna have to wait 9 months, di ba? Para manganak. Pagkatapos pagka nanganak, you're gonna have to wait years to see, in case not to scare people, but these are real questions that are asked on more normal situations. This is how long-term the experiments and the period of observation usually run. And then, of course, parang every little thing that might be different from one society to the other, from one ethnicity to another. So many situations that we frankly don't have time. On the other side of it, we also don't have time to wait that long.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Even now, diba? How many months have we been in a pandemic? Almost 10 months, right? But when you think about when the vaccine will come, when you're talking about managing expectations, you're still talking about 1 more year of this. And already we're warning of a surge. Oh, my. So yan na yung segue ko.
Yan na yung segue. I know what's coming. Okay. With that segue, let's bring in our first guest for tonight. We have with us Jojo Garcia, the General Manager of the Metro Manila Development Authority. GM Jojo, good evening po, and welcome to the Chiefs.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening po.
Hey, sir.
Good evening to all your viewers and listeners.
Iba na nga ng background natin kasi dati ngayon kahoy.
Brighter.
Brighter. More patterns. Okay, GM Jojo. Well, the thing on everybody's mind now is the holiday season and how it's going to impact our relationship, if you would call it that, with COVID-19 or with SARS-CoV-2. Ito nga, si Anthony Fauci ng US is so concerned that 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, that's only one day, on November 30, 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, they will have a spike in COVID-19 cases in the US. And tayo, we're talking about the Philippines where we have the longest Christmas season and it's just coming up pa lang with this, it's now December 2. So, my question to you po is this anong plano ng MMDA at ng Metro Manila mayors with regard to how to, I suppose, minimize the spike? I can't say avoid the spike, minimize the spike after Christmas season.
Good evening po again. First, doon mo tayo sa bagong yung issue sa minors. Last Sunday kasi nagkaroon kami ng pagpupulong, the Metro Manila mayors with the IATF secretaries. Na-bring up yung tukol sa minors na baka pwede lumabas, basta kasama ang magulang or responsible adult. So, by Monday, nagkaroon ng mga opinion sa Viber group namin. That's why we called an emergency meeting last night with the Metro Manila mayors, and of course, our Chairman Lim. Nagkaroon ng healthy discussion, kung allowed ba ang minors, etc., anong age bracket, saan papayagan, anong limitation. That's why nagkasundo ko kami na before we vote on something, we need to listen first sa expert. So, ang expert pagdating sa minor is the Philippine Pediatric Society. Ang presidente si Dr. Eusebio. So, I contacted her, talked to her this morning, baka may opinion kayo. Of course, sila yung kumbaga private group na hindi sa gobyerno na pwede naming pakinggan. So, after a few hours, binalikan niya ako, nagkaroon sila ng pag-meeting, including the pediatric infectious disease na group. At sinabi nga nila na as much as possible, wag na nating palabasin muna ang mga minors. No?
May recommendation na.
GM,
Okay.
Yes.
GM, pwedeng atrasan ko lang,
Recommendation,
GM, pwedeng atrasan ko lang ng kaunti yung story.
Yes.
Because
Opo.
yung meeting ngayon, ay nga, where the mayor seemed to have reconsidered. In fact, that was the headline kanina sa big story. No? They're rethinking it. They've reconsidered it. There's a pushback to it. You can imagine the headlines tomorrow. But the premise there is, one, in-announced the previous days na may napahahayaan na. In fact, we were seeing Malacanang reacting, saying, ganun naman, maluwag pa naman yung mga malls and so on. But yun lang premise na nagpasya ang mga mayor to consult muna experts. Are we saying that when the announcement was made, nobody had consulted the experts yet?
Yes, ganito yan. No? That's why. No? Actually, ang unang naglabas ng advisory is the GIG. No? Kasi nga, based on their interpretation of the IATF guidelines sa mga minimum health protocols. No? That's number one. Number two, of course, yung mga mayors natin, talagang gusto kong tumakbo ang ekonomiya. Malaking tulong yan eh. Kasi pag pinalabas mo ang bata, kasama magulang. No? So, package yan eh. No? Ngayon, sabi ko nga, napag-usapan nung Sunday at we want to thank Secretary Anyo no, ng DLG po. Kasi nga, sabi niya, kung anong gusto ng mayor, we trust them. No? Meaning, kung anong decision yan, sila na sa enforcement eh. Kung may enforcement, madali yan eh. No? Talagang masusunod natin yung guide. Kaya lang, of course, may mga conservative ding mayors na sandali, preno muna tayo, sayang yung numero natin. Remember, no? For the longest time, ang numero po ng Metro Manila talagang pababa eh. Nasa 2,400 na active cases natin. So, kaya nga nung nag-meeting kami kagabi, medyo mahaba-haba. Of course, may opinion sa kaliwa, may opinion sa kanan, no? That's why, ang naging solusyon is magtanong tayo sa expert. Yung talagang may hawak. Kasi lahat naman lahat kasi ng city, may mga city health officer yan. Pwedeng doktor yan, family doctor, tanongin mo. Pwedeng ibang klaseng field ng medicine. But the expert on minors is the Philippine Pediatric Society na hindi na konsulta. No? So, inopen lang po yan eh. That's why, dahil responsable nga ang ating mga mayors, pumayag lahat na sige, tanungin natin. Ngayon, nung tinanungan namin, nagkaroon ng desisyon, forward ko sa Viber group namin, no? Dito ka magugulat sa ating mga mayor kung gaano sila ka-responsable. Dahil nung nagpaboto ako, 17-0 ang score. Meaning lahat no, naniwala at pinagkatiwalaan ang opinion ng expert. Kaya nga kumbaga last night naka-status ko lang kami. Kasi ano ba yung status ko? Talagang hindi naman talaga pwede ang minors eh. Kaya nga ang Metro Manila, ginawa natin 18 to 65. Sa buong Pilipinas is 15 to 65 na. Kasi MGCQ pa sila. Ngayon, bakit 18? Itong mga numero to, hindi naman to hilugot kung saan lang eh. May pag-aaral yan. Ang 18 sa MNCR, ba't pinaya? Kasi yung 18, nagtatrabaho na yan. We consider them as adult eh. At the same time, nung tinanong ko yung PDA expert, ang definition pala ng PDA is 17 below. Kaya pala kahit na ikaw ay malaking bulas ka na bata, 17 years old, hindi ka sa regular doctor, sa PDA ka pa rin dinadala. No? So meaning, merong pinag-aralan niyang 18 to 65 na yan eh. Yung vulnerable naman. Pero may exemption lagi. Ano ba yung mga exemptions? Pagka-essential ang gagawin mo. Ano ba itong essential? Let's say senior ka, wala kang mautusan, bili ka ng gamot, bili ka ng pagkain, nagtatrabaho ka, no? Mag-exercise ka, may medical treatment ka, may dental appointment ka. Yan po, pinapayagan yan na lumabas. Kaya nga, sabi lang, believe din tayo sa ating mga mayors, I want to commend them, no? Under the leadership of Chairman Lim, talagang si kami, pag nag-uusap kami, talagang merong puti, may itim, pero kung ano man ang manalo, lahat susunod. Kasi nga, ang NCR po is borderless. Hindi naman pwede na Makati allowed, let's say, ang Quezon City hindi. Yung taga Quezon City, pupunta lang yung bata sa Makati, pero uwi sa Quezon City. Kaya hindi talaga pwede.
But
Mayor,
ano po, I think naman it's laudable that the mayors have the political will to make this decision. Pero going back to Robbie's question po kasi we understand the logic, we understand the rationale, and we understand the process that the MMC took in coming to this decision. But that also brings up na, as Robbie was pointing out, the question na bakit yung IATF nag-anunsyo ng pagpapaluwag na parang hindi pa pala nakonsulta yung Pediatrics Society?
Hindi po,
Para pong messaging issue po, parang
Yeah.
parang nag-conflicting messaging.
Hindi po. Kasi nga po, nung tinanong namin kung ano ang gusto ng mayor, ang sinabi namin, at kung below 15 yan, kailangang ipaalam sa IATF. Siguro hindi lang nakuha yung buong interview, no? Kasi kausap ko po personal mismo si Secretary Anyo. If ever, sabi niya, papayagan ng minor, no? Kailangan gumawa ng ordinansa. Ngayon, kung below 15 ang palalabasin, kailangan ipaalam muna sa IATF yan na may approval. Kasi allowed sa buong Pilipinas is 15 to 65. Meaning, pag 14 ka, hindi pa rin pwede yan So, kahit na gumawa ng ordinansa ang isang lugar, na let's say 7, pwede lumabas yan, kung hindi papayagan ng IATF, hindi pa rin papayagan. Ang last say is IATF. The good thing about this is, they always respect the decision of the NCR mayors. Why? Kasi lagi nilang sinasabi, ang enforcement nasa mayor nasa local Sabi nga natin, lahat ng kalsada, lahat ng iskinita, kabisado ng mayor yan. Alam niya kung saan niya ipatutupad, kaya nga yung lockdown, pinapayagan pa rin yan So, kumbaga, sinasabi lang nila, kaya nga nung in-interview rin ng PNP noon, basta may ordinansa, pwede. Kaya nga yung mga mayors, sumubok lang. Nasabi na, baka pwede na to. Hindi pa naman final yun Kala mo naman dito, pagka nagbigay ka lang ng idea, kala nila final Kaya nga, nag-meeting kami kinabukasan dahil nagkaroon ng kalituan. Dahil yung mga mayor na ayaw, sandali, hindi pa tayo nakonsulta. Kaya kami nag-usap-usap. At ang naging napag-usapan nga is, sa expert tayo magtanong. Which yung expert naman, nagbigay ng opinion, sinunod natin yan. Kaya nga matasabi natin, napaka-responsable po talaga ng ating mga mayors. Lalo na dinig nila ang sinabi ng experts, lahat, kahit yung nag-bring up ng idea niyan, bumoto ng no, na hindi pwede.
Mr. Garcia, good evening.
Ay, good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, Mr. Garcia, what about nagbabalak din ba yung mga metro mayors na mag-issue ng uniform order? Kasi meron mga bata ngayon na nagpupunta, some groups are providing yung mga parang hindi naman siya, parang mga facilities sa labas ng bahay para maka-access ng internet. Saka yung setup nila parang face-to-face na, di ba? Medyo magkakalapit na yung mga Meron bang ganong, may binabalak ba kayo also na uniform na rules? Ang mga
okay.
Kasi medyo bata yung mga estudyante yun They look quite young,
Actually, lahat po, pagdating po sa estudyante, sa mga ganyang face-to-face, ang hiningan po namin approval dyan is DepEd. Say po nila yan. Kaya nga meron atang instance sa isang lugar sa Metro Manila, hindi ko naman nababanggitin, na may therapy something yung mga bata, pero minor. Kaya lang yung facility nasa under sa jurisdiction ng DepEd. Hindi pwede ang face-to-face, so hindi pinayagan yan. Kaya minsan may makikita ka rin, ba't may bata sa mall? Nakakapasok yan. Tandaan natin, pag pumasok ka sa mall, may mga malls kasi may clinic May mga dental clinics dyan, may mga, parang maliit na hospital na nga yan So pag sabi nga ng mga mayors natin, yung mga establishments, commercial establishment, restaurants, madaling i-monitor yan, madaling enforcement yan. Kasi pag lumabag sila sa minimum health protocol, pwede natin ipasara o i-cancel ang business permit. Nangyari na yan, may mga golf course na sinara, may mga establishment na sinara, dahil nga hindi sumusunod. Ang pinababantayan ngayon, which paulit-ulit na pinapa-announce din sa atin ng mga mayors, ang mahirap po talaga i-monitor yung household. Kasi hindi natin makokontrol yan Hindi natin alam ilan ng tao sa loob ng bahay. Kaya nga po pinapakiusap namin, let's say sa compound, 10 kayo or 12, magkakainan kayo. Siguro kayo na lang, huwag na kayo mag-imbita ng ibang barangay, ibang syudad, o kapitbahay. Kasi nga, dyan po talaga nag-spread, Nakikita naman natin yung nangyari sa ibang bansa. Dahil sa mass gathering, nag-second lockdown sila. No, nanghihinayang katulad nga po nung pinag-uusapan nyo kanina. Kami ninenervyos din pagdating ng January. May Noche Buena, may Buena Noche yan. Ano? Hindi natin alam kung ano ang mangyayari. Hopefully, manageable kung mag-increase man. Kasi hindi na natin kaya bumalik nang talagang mahigpit na lockdown ulit. Kaya nga nakikiusap kami, konting panahon na lang, no? Nandiyan na yung vaccine, parating na. Inaasikaso na po ng national government yan. Baka pwede, tsaga-tsagain na po natin. Maganda po ang numero ng Metro Manila. Sa ngayon nga, kinukomend lagi ng IATF ang mayors natin. Bakit? Kasi napanatili nila yung numero Hindi tumataas ng malaki at pababa pa. Meaning, yung mga tao, responsable na rin. Katulad nga po nung pag-uusap tayo dati. Ba't ka nag-face mask? Para hindi mahuli. Ngayon, iba na. Ba't ka nag-face mask? I want to protect myself at yung mga mahal ko sa buhay.
GM, a question lang. When you were consulting the experts, and was that just the pediatric society, and for that matter, nung nag-uusap ulit yung mga mayor, and they said, teka muna, alamin muna natin lahat. Were there other issues that came up that you needed to consult experts on, other than age, other than the issue of being minors?
Wala lang. Bali, ang topic lang talaga namin last night is this. Yan lang. Yung tungkol sa minor nga. Kasi nga, masyadong na-headline. Kumbaga kasi nung Sunday, nagmi-meeting lang kami, napag-usapan lang yan. So, of course, pag tinanong ano na pag-usapan, siguro ng ibang media, eto, baka yung minor, pwede na. Nung tinanong naman ng ITF, syempre, depende sa mayor yan, kung papayagan, kung may ordinansa. Wala pa namang may ordinansa sa 17 cities. Kahit isa Wala pang may ordinansa.
Okay, now a crucial detail na a lot of people are, sorry Luchi, quick detail lang that a lot of people are asking. Ano na ngayon ang demarcation natin sa minor? Gumalaw ba yon? Malinaw na ba kung ano yung definition natin ng minor?
Yes. Sa NCR po, 17 below is hindi allowed lumabas. So 18, we still stick to 18 to 65. Pero yung December po, nagbago na curfew natin almost, 12 to 3 na yan, in anticipation of Simbang Gabi. Dahil ang Simbang Gabi po, pinayagan natin mag-start ng 3 a.m. dahil nga 30% lang ang capacity para mas madaming ma-serve. At pangalawa po, nawala ako. Yung ano po, yung Nazareno, by January, nakiusap po si Mary Scott, wala na po yung Nazareno na parada, So may mga nagbabalak per city, magbamarcha. Yan po, bawal na bawal. Sana po maiwasan na natin.
So, okay.
GM, maiba naman ako meron kasing sulat si Congressman Crisologo kay MMDA Chair Danny Lim, tungkol dun sa mga U-turn slots sa EDSA. Do you think that you can reconsider nga?
Yes.
Consider reopening the U-turn slots, especially the one in front of Trinoma. And I think he requested for another U-turn slot, Ano ba yun?
Lagi ko po, nakakusap ko po si
Grabe na
Congressman
yung traffic, GM. I'm sure you know.
Yes.
So,
Actually, siguro it will take us more than 30 minutes to talk about this. Pero i-shorten ko na lang ba. Number one, we really give priority to the commuters. We need to move people, not vehicles. More people, much better. That's number one. Number two, nakita naman natin yung result niya. From Monumento to Ayala, 45 minutes na lang ang bus natin. Dati 3.5 hours yan. May pandemic ngayon, mas gusto natin mas mabilis ang travel time kasi mas madami sila sa bus. Yung mga kotse, kasama mo dyan, kapamilya mo, o kakilala mo, medyo safe kayo. Sa public transportation, hindi po yung kakilala yan, halo-halo yan. Kaya kailangan mas mabilis ang biyahe yan. Ngayon, pagdating sa U-turn, nagkaroon po kami ng meeting kanina with DOTR. May option kami, nalagyan ng U-turn. Pero lalagyan natin ng U-turn yan, may konting infrastructure. Yung tinatawag natin elevated busway. Meaning, may part sa EDSA, yung crucial U-turn yan, yung bus po, parang malaking humps. Pero yung ilalim gagawin natin U-turn. Yes. Pero as long as...
long-term yun, di ba?
Hindi po,
So
3 months lang po yan. 3 months yan, kaya gawin yan. Naghahanap lang po kami ng budget, Kung nadaan kayo sa NLEX, meron dyan sa part ng viaduct nila, may parang hubs dyan na bakal, At kaya truck, pahabain lang, So we're finding a way. Kasi po, nagkaroon kami ng simulation yan sa computer. pag nagbukas tayo ng isang U-turn, stop and go ang bus, yung 2 lanes, no, yung bali kung first lane yung bus, second and third lane, yan yung mag-U-turn. Pag dumaan ng bus, hihinto yan. Pag huminto yan, 2 lane yan, wala na makakadaan sa EDSA.
Parado na.
We were talking about more than 100,000 vehicles na nag-U-turn. So ang sa atin lang, no, of course, may infrastruktura ng katapat yan, pero kung i-compare po natin yung datos ng gantong date last year, wala pang COVID, napakalayo po, mas maluwag po ngayon. Napansin lang ng tao ang pagsikip dahil siguro nasanay nung MECQ, wala masyadong sakyan. Pangalawa, nakikita nila yung busway, dire-diretso, ino-overtaken sila ng bus na 50 kilometers per hour. Sila ang takbo nila 20. Pero before COVID po, no, wala nang rush hour sa EDSA. The whole hours in the morning and afternoon, ang average yan 7 to 9 kilometers per hour. Ngayon po, during rush hour, talagang masikap because of volume. Pero dumaan ka ng tanghala, yung patay na oras, mabilis ang takbo nyo. Ibig sabihin, talagang nako-compare lang dati, pero ang EDSA po ngayon tumatakbo, kahit mabagal lang dahil sa dami, pero nawala yung obstruction sa kanan. Yung mga bus na kung saan humihinto, tinanggal po natin yan. At the same time, yung ating mga commuters bumilis po ang biyahe.
Alright. Okay.
MMDA General Manager Jojo Garcia. Sir, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight.
Ay, maraming salamat po.
Sir.
Stay safe po, everyone. Stay safe po. Stay
Ingat
safe.
po.
Thank you po.
Kayo
Merry
rin.
Christmas. We
Parang
will
hindi
just
na
go
natin
into a break.
i-invite din
Ayun na, hindi naman. Hindi kasi
Parang
December
parang hindi na magpapaimbita.
Kasi December na, I don't know. Oh, we'll just go into a break. So please stay with us.
Welcome back to the Chiefs. We're now in the final stage of our conversation. And now we'd like to welcome the spokesperson for the Department of Health, Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire. Good evening, Usec Vergeire.
Good evening po, ma'am.
Welcome again to the Chiefs.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening, ma'am.
Po,
Yes.
magandang gabi.
Usec, there's a lot of excitement today about the vaccines. Magro-roll out na next week ang UK and the US in mid-December. At tayo, according to Secretary Galvez, we might get the vaccine by the first quarter na, bibilisan daw at nag-issue na ng emergency use authorization order si President Duterte. Ano po yung preparations ng Department of Health for this speeded up timetable? Kaya-kaya ba natin yon by the first quarter?
Well, lahat po naman ay ginagawa natin ngayon so that we can be able to have this timeline na binabanggit po ng ating vaccine czar. Lahat po tayo are in line with this objective of having it at the earliest time possible. So ang ginagawa po ngayon, not just DOH but the whole team of government for the vaccines headed by the vaccine czar, nakikipag-usap na po tayo sa iba't ibang mga bilateral partners, manufacturers, and specifically dito po sa bakunang sinabing nakakuha na nga po nitong authorization sa UK. Kaya nga po tayo nang hingi rin sa ating presidente ng authority for FDA to have this authority also for EUA or the emergency use authorization. Para pag dumating po ang mga produkto, katulad nga po nito na nakapasa na sa ibang bansa, with their regulatory processes, bibilis po ang proseso pagdating dito sa atin, and we can already expedite the regulatory process, granting that they be evaluated and approved by our vaccine experts panel.
How fast
Ma'am?
can that be used? Like, how fast is that kung emergency use?
Oh, well, yes, ma'am. We have this regular process of the Food and Drug Administration, especially for new technologies, which can run from 270 days to a year's time. Pero with pandemic that we have right now, nakapag-usap-usap po, nakapag-streamline ng mga proseso, and we're looking at about 21 days to 40 days in total para lang po ma-evaluate ng buo ito po mga mag-a-apply dito sa ating bansa. And it can also be shortened, specifically kung may EUA na nga po from other countries yung ating produkto na ipapasok, and also kung kumpleto po ang maisusumite na requirements sa atin para mas mabilis ang proseso.
Ma'am, if I may backtrack a bit lang, I understand na yung timetable ni Secretary Galvez na first quarter is based more or less lang on fast-tracking the regulatory approval of the vaccines with the emergency use authorization and all that. Pero po, realistically, factoring in all the other important elements of purchasing, importing, distributing the vaccines, realistically, what timetable po are we looking at for the actual vaccination?
Well, tama naman po kayo, no, that there would be a lot of factors when we talk about procuring these vaccines. Hindi lang po yung paglabas talaga sa merkado at nagkaroon ng EUA at nakatapos ng regulatory process. We have to look also at the financing mechanisms that we are going to apply. Second, we have to look at the distribution, and you are right on that. And also, when we start implementing, meron pa hong kasama yan na mag-engage ka ng community mo muna, i-mobilize mo or i-engage mo rin ng local government officials. Marami pong preparasyon. Kaya nga po, in order for us to achieve that specific timeline, we are already preparing now, no? So yung financing mechanisms po, nakikipag-usap na tayo sa ating multilateral partners. The other options also are being managed already by the Department of Finance, kasama po ang ibang ahensya ng gobyerno. And of course, yun pong deployment ng mga bakuna, how it's going to be distributed, how it's going to be stored, are all being prepared for at this current time.
Ma'am, yun po sa EUA, nabanggit nyo nga po, yung among other things, and there are many factors, but among other things that you would consider sa baka mapabilis pa nga EUA dito, one factor might be kung may EUA na rin from other countries. I'm just curious po, yung EUA ba po sa iba-ibang bansa, are those all treated equally? Are all EUAs the same? For example, yung EUA ng United States, EUA ng UK, is that essentially the same as the standards for the EUA for China and the EUA for Russia?
Well, there are certain countries which are classified as stringent national regulatory agencies by the WHO. Meron po kasing isang tool ang WHO na naa-assess niya po ang bawat regulatory process ng bawat bansa. At dito po makaklasify kung ang iyong NRA or the National Regulatory Agency is up to that standard that you can be classified as a stringent NRA. So if you are part of that stringent National Regulatory Agency, meron hong mga bansa na pare-pareho sila ng classification, like that of US and UK, pareho po yan ang classification. So these national regulatory agencies, sila po yung sinasabi natin na up to that standard, no? They have met that standards para po magkaroon sila ng maayos na pagpoproseso ng mga regulation. So with this kind of process na may iba-iba hong klasifikasyon, ang bawat FDA po or National Regulatory Agency of each country can go through that reliance and recognition path. Kung saan you can recognize this National Regulatory Agency standards so that pag dumating dito, konting proseso na lang, you can already expedite. And that is what we are going to do.
Okay, only
Ma'am,
because
ano
you
po
didn't,
yung
only, ma'am, sorry, one quick lang, only because you didn't mention them, do we assume therefore that China and Russia are not on that level of stringency?
I am really sorry, but I am not, I cannot remember if they are included. So I do not like to comment on that. Baka mali yung masabi ko.
Oo. Pero ma'am, yung sinasabi niyong konting proseso, ano po yun exactly? And how long will that take? Kung may EUA na halimbawa sa UK or sa US, So dito na lang sa atin, ano po yung konting prosesong yun? Anong
Ma'am,
gagawin ng
yes,
FDA
ma'am.
exactly? Yeah.
When we do our evaluation, especially with vaccines, what we do in this regular process that we have, we go to the country of origin kung saan nanggagaling ang bakuna. Meron po kaming foreign inspectors, mga FDA inspectors who go to the country of origin ng bakuna. Tinitignan ho natin kung paano sila nag-manufacture. Tinitignan natin yung good manufacturing practices nila if they are following standards and all. So may ganun ho tayong proseso kaya medyo matagal talaga ang ibinibigay. Plus, talagang there is this tedious evaluation of all of this dossier, no? Yung documents na ibibigay sa'yo. Kung meron pang kulang, maaari pa tayong makipag-ugnayan dun sa country of origin or dun sa manufacturer. So it's a long process. But now that we can expedite, the processes that had been undertaken already by these national regulatory
Hindi na
agencies,
natin gagawin.
hindi na po yan gagawin. Ano? Meron na lang ho tayong a list of steps which are all shortened na because we rely and we recognize the expertise already of that specific country.
Oo. So, ma'am, pag dumating ba yung mga vaccines, will they be mandatorily, will it be mandatory for us to give it to whoever, to administer it to whoever we feel they should be administered to? For example, the cops, the health workers, or do they have the option to say no?
Well, that is the big question right now. It has been asked before. Unang-una, kailangan nating balikan lahat po ng gagawin nating pagbabakuna, we will be getting informed consent. So the person or the individual will always have that right, no? Kapag ayaw niya magbigay ng informed consent, I think that would be something of a challenge for us because if we try to look at the very objective of immunization, we would want to have that herd immunity so that we can protect the whole population. Now, if people will start refusing to accept this vaccine, and then baka ma-defeat po yung purpose. So yan ho yung pinag-uusapan natin ngayon. We are coordinating with our legal services as well as, of course, with the Department of Justice. We are going to bring this forward so that we will be guided on how we can be able to implement this without violating any rights of any individual, but at the same time, na ipupush natin yung objective po ng public health.
That's an interesting conundrum. I mean, constitutionally and legally, of course, health-wise, you would want to vaccinate everybody kasi anybody who's not vaccinated may end up being a carrier and infecting other people. On the other hand po, you can't really force anybody to take a medicine or a vaccine, di ba? So that's going to be next year. I suppose that's going to be an issue that we will have to talk about.
Yes, sir. Actually, meron na ho naman na nauna na ganitong sitwasyon. If you remember, we have a law for the immunization of all children less than 1 year old. And this is based on a law that was issued. So ang mga nanay, they are mandated na dalhin mo yung anak mo dun sa mga facilities natin, kailangan pababakunahan nyo. But of course, nandun pa rin po yung sinasabi natin na dapat may consent. Di naman dadalhin ng nanay kung ayaw niya talaga, hindi po ba? Pero because of this, mas naipupursige po ng gobyerno ang ating mga programa katulad ng pagbabakuna. And hopefully, in this kind of situation that we have right now, people will be convinced that they need the vaccine so that we can attain that herd immunity. And based from the recent survey, lumabas naman po that almost 60% of those respondents were interested and were willing to receive the vaccine.
Pwede bang legislation to improve compliance? Because you mentioned the law on children. Makakatulong ba if there's legislation passed para magkaroon ng konting compelling, merong compelling factor behind the vaccination? Kasi kung hindi naman kung not enough people will get the vaccine, yun na, hindi tayo magkakaroon ng herd immunity. Pwede ba yung i-legislate?
Of course, ma'am, that would always be something that is welcome, that magkakaroon tayo. But I think also with our existing laws, especially that there is a pandemic, yung public health po ang priority natin lahat sa ngayon. And the government has that right para magpatupad ng mga programa para po masugpo natin itong nagkukos nitong pandemic na ito. So but anyway, kailangan din po siguro talaga ng maliwanag na implementing guidelines regarding this.
Ma'am, may iba naman po ng kaunti. The other big story tonight and today is that the Metro Manila mayor seems to have reconsidered and pushed back on that announcement na papayagan na raw po ang minors sa mga malls, no? I would imagine public health officials will welcome this as additional conservatism and more safety for people. But we want to ask about the protocols here because maganda naman po yung explanation ni GM Jojo Garcia ng MMDA on the process of consultation. But it seemed to us, even with the explanation of GM Garcia, that the consultation with the Pediatric Society in particular seemed to have come as an afterthought. Na para bang yung IATF, the protocol stopped at we will let the local governments decide. And then the local governments decided to consult the Pediatric Society only after the outcry and only after it was announced na papayagan ng minors. I'm just curious about the protocols about consulting experts. Hindi ba po automatic yun, whether it's local or national government?
Well, it's part of the process, sir. That's why we have, as you know, we have different types of experts for different types of things that we need, no? So we have our technical advisory group experts kung saan sila po talaga yung nag-guide sa amin sa mga policies na ginagawa namin. We have our lab experts and the others. So ang proseso naman po talaga ay nanggagaling talaga ang policy direction sa interagency task force. Kung ano po ang sasabihin ng interagency task force, yun po yung pinapatupad ng ating local governments being implementers. I think what happened here would be, it's just a miscommunication, no? Nagkaroon lang po ng miscommunication. Actually, nung nakipag-usap po ang ating local government mayors, no, sa ating mga experts, and they got the recommendation from them, got evidences, pinag-usapan din po kanina sa sub-technical working group ng IATF ito at inilahad din ng DOH sa mga ebidensya kung saan it was all agreed naman. The process would be that it would be discussed in the technical working group of IATF so that the technical details will be discussed and can be worked on before representing to the IATF the counter-argument if it was really a counter-argument. So ito po yung proseso natin. So it is just really a miscommunication, I think, dun po sa mga lumabas na mga balita nung mga nakarang araw.
What exactly was the miscommunication, ma'am? I mean, because many perceived that it was an announcement by the IATF na pwede na ang minors sa malls. Are you saying there was actually no decision at that point that it was announced and at that point that even Malacanang was rationalizing it?
Hindi naman po. Ang sinasabi natin, pinag-uusapan naman po lahat yan. But as to the resolutions, as to the final agreement, it can still be consulted with our experts kasi hindi pa naman po naging final siguro ang naging desisyon nila with this kind of proposals.
Actually, nagiging issue nga po yung messaging, no? Dahil medyo nakakalito yung mga naririnig namin kuminsan sa mga press conferences. Halimbawa, on the one hand, people are being encouraged to go and spend, in effect, to help the economy. On the other hand, people are also being told to, as much as possible, limit gatherings, stay home, etc., etc. Ma'am, can you just describe to us exactly what the main messages would be and what other things out there are hanging in the balance with people wondering whether to comply with this or not? Bakit ho ba medyo may kaguluhan? Ano po ang last word dapat, especially now that we seem to be facing a possible surge in cases?
Yes, ma'am, you're right with that. No? So our main message right now is we'd like to inform the public that there is this possibility of a surge come January if and when we are not going to comply with the standards that we have been implementing for the longest time. I just like to give brief example of what happened in Canada. In Canada, they had their Thanksgiving in last October, and during that time, their government was really disseminating information, trying to control the interzonal movements because people will be going back to their families, visiting them. But unfortunately, hindi po masyado nasunod. So after about 3 to 4 weeks, tumaas ng husto ang kaso sa Canada. From a once 1,900 per week average, they have experienced almost 6,000 per week average sa ngayon because of this surge, because of this Thanksgiving Day. And we are reminding people na pwedeng mangyari po ito sa atin dahil dyan. We are not opposing that the economy and the sectors will open. Okay po, but we need to balance. We still need to implement the standards. Kaya po nung Lunes, nagka-presscon kami with the Health Professional Alliance Against COVID-19. Ito po yung mga medical societies natin. Sila po yung mga healthcare workers natin sa mga ospital. Dahil natatakot na rin po sila na pag nag-surge, mahihirapan na ho makaanggapay ang ating sistema. Kaya po ang sinasabi natin, you like to go to the mall? Well, you have to strictly employ and comply with 3 out of 4 conditions. So 3 out of 4, dapat merong maayos ang circulation ng air, that is ventilation. Dapat ayos mo ang pagsuot mo ng mask at saka face shield. Meron ka dapat 1 meter distance at saka yung pagstay mo, try to minimize it to just less than 30 minutes. Now, they said just 3 out of 4 because minsan kakain ka, tatanggalin mo yung mask mo at saka face shield, pero dapat yung tatlo masunod pa rin. That is the only way that we can prevent transmission. And we also, in the DOH, we are disseminating information if we can have alternative options or alternative measures on how we will be spending our Christmas. Pwede naman hong online na party, pwede naman pong online mass so that we can prevent yung mass gathering, congregation of people, where we know, and base naman din po sa pag-aaral, that this is the talagang most critical and can be the highest risk for getting the disease.
Usec, mas tatalag siguro yung warning kung sasabihin sa mga tao yung possible consequences. Kasi sa ibang bansa, after a surge, naghihigpit sila, they impose lockdowns again. Ngayon yung economic managers natin, they're saying medyo malabo nang gawin yan ngayon dahil sa sobrang paghihirap na natin. But is it still actually possible? Will you, being health professionals, will you recommend kung magkaroon ng surge after Christmas na maghigpit uli at magsara na naman yung ibang mga negosyo?
Yes, and what is the possibility that we will slide down again to MECQ, halimbawa?
Yan po ay sana huwag mangyari. Pero kung sakasakali nga pong mag-surge, meron na ho tayo mga pag-uusap sa mga eksperto ngayon about projections. No? At talagang mataas po yung napo-project compared to before. And pag nangyari po yan, baka mapunta po tayo dun sa wala na po tayong option but to lock down again because we can never control the infection and the transmission kung hindi po natin isasara yung mga borders natin. Kaya nga po ang sinasabi natin sa mga kababayan natin, ayaw na ho natin bumalik sa dati. If you just cooperate with government, we will be able to prevent this possible surge coming January of 2021.
So there's
what numbers would trigger a surge? Kasi what we understand from Octa research na yung R naught now, yung infectivity rate is at 0.93. Around what numbers po would trigger a lockdown, I mean?
Well, it will depend. It will depend because when I say that we assess the situation, it is just not the numbers that we talk about. We talk about the capacity of the health system. Kailangan po natin tignan kung yung ating mga ospital ay ready, kung makaka-accommodate sila ng mga pasyente. No? In the recent August na nag-surge po yung ating mga kaso, nakita ho natin kung paano napuno ang ospital dito sa Maynila, no? Sa Metro Manila. Nakita natin ang mga pasyente nasa mga tents na lang. Hirap na hirap po tayo maglipat ng mga pasyente at ihanap sila ng mga tutuluyan. So, pag tinignan ho natin yung pagtaas ng kaso at kasabay ng pagpuno ng mga ospital, yan po natin makikita na we are repeating that surge that we had last August.
So you're
In the meantime po, kamusta po ang facilities natin, especially heading into the Christmas season? What do we particularly anticipate usually, even in the more normal times, but what do we usually associate sa Christmas season, and how is all of that relative to the status of our facilities right now?
Oh, well, our facilities right now are nasa low risk po tayo pag tinignan natin in general terms for the whole of the country. Mababa po ang utilization, especially in Metro Manila na minsan nang napuno. Pero makikita pa rin po natin na meron hong mga lugar ngayon na talagang binabantayan natin may mga pagtaas ng kaso at nagni-near po ng danger zone yung kanilang mga facilities, mga ospital, ICU, isolation bed, ward bed. So kaya nga po ating binabantayan, pinapaalalahanan. Kanina po nakipag-meeting na kami sa National Task Force, also with all of the regional offices of DOH for them to prepare for a possible surge kung sakasakali para hindi na po tayo nagugulat pag dumadating po yung mga panahon na yon. Ang isa pong tinitingnan natin ngayon, yun pong mandato ng Bayanihan 2 na batas na sinasabi lahat po ng government hospitals kailangan at least 30% of your beds are dedicated to COVID, and for private hospitals dapat 20%. Pero nakikita po natin ngayon nakaka-comply po ang public hospitals but the private hospitals kulang pa rin po ang naide-dedicate. Kaya nga po talagang pinagpupursige namin ang pakikipag-network sa kanila so that they can also be part of that network at ma-comply natin itong pangangailangan natin.
Perfect, ulitin ko lang yung sinabi niyo, lilinawin ko lang, no? You are saying na meron na talagang usapan yung mga health experts about the possibility na maghihigpit ulit ng restrictions kapag nagkaroon ng surge, tama yun. Meron na, you're not ruling out the possibility.
No, ma'am. Wala pa ho tayong usapan na ganun. I like to clarify what I just said. I just said, pag dumating tayo sa punto na yun, baka mawawalan tayo ng option. But there are still no discussions on this about restrictions and all. We are just trying to flag the possibility that there might be a surge because of this holiday season at nakikita na ho natin yung mga kukumpul-kumpul na mga tao sa iba't ibang public places.
Ma'am, if I may, in the past days, pinag-uusapan natin Christmas season in general. Pero dahil napakahaba ng Christmas season dito, there are a lot of events and occasions within that season. I want to ask about New Year's in particular. Meron na po bang specific guidelines for New Year's? Alam natin na guidelines for Christmas, wala nang Christmas party. We know what you're encouraging, apat dapat even when it comes to family gatherings. Pero kanina lang kasi napansin ko, I don't know if I was seeing things, pero kanina yung reporter namin sa News 5, background niya may fireworks sa Pasay. So alam natin na so I'm just wondering, what are the guidelines down to the barangay level on New Year's Eve?
Yes, sir.
Open air naman yun.
Actually, whatever guidelines that we have right now for the Christmas season, it will be the same for New Year's, except that for New Year's Eve, yung iwas paputok po, pinapatupad natin. And it has been years that we had been implementing this. We have an executive order kung saan binaban na ang pagpapaputok, ang mga firecrackers, except for yung LGUs makapag-designate ng isang fireworks display zone kung saan doon na lang magkakaroon ng mga pagkakasayahan. Pero nga ngayon na may COVID-19, syempre hindi po natin i-encourage ang pagsasama-sama. Ilalagay ho yan dun sa mga paalala natin sa ating mga kababayan. But definitely, we have guidelines for this, especially for the iwas paputok, to prevent further injuries ng mga tao pagdating ng panahon na yan.
Yung
tinatanong ko kasi dati pagka iwas paputok, the alternative has always been Oplan Torotot, di ba? But now sa COVID, we're all conscious about yung ibubuga mo, dapat nga naka-face na. So I mean things like that, no, little details like that. I would imagine pati yung Torotot. I mean, Father Austriaco was saying even sa mass he's concerned about people singing. Then ngayon, if people fall back on the default of, hindi, sige, turotot muna tayo, even the turotot might have to be reconsidered.
Right, I agree with you, sir, and that will be part of that those things that we will be including in the guidelines because pag nagturotot ka, mas madami pong lalabas na virus sa inyo, no? And we are not going to allow that to avoid further transmission.
Yung pagsasama
dapat maganda rin kayo sa
yung pagsasama-sama bawal, pero yung pagpaputok pwede ba? Halimbawa yung LGU, gusto nila magpaputok para lang may, kahit walang gathering, o kaya yung international competition ng paputok sa Manila Bay, na kakunti naman tao, yun papayagan ba yun?
Fireworks po yan, ano? Pag fireworks naman po, katulad po ng executive order, napapayagan may designated zone. Pero kailangan lang pong magkaroon ng pag-iingat, especially for those organizers. If it's going to draw a crowd,
Yes, crowd.
lalo pa, hindi pa nila dapat yan payagan. And the ILG has to be on top of this.
Yes. At saka ma'am, I mean, pag New Year, syempre yung mga ER, napaka-busy na naman yan kung magpapaputok, no? At ayaw na natin siguro dumagdag ang trabaho ng mga health workers, di ba? With all those casualties that come with the salubong of the New Year. So I guess we have to double up on the warnings also for that.
Yes, ma'am. Kaya nga po nakapag-develop na po kami ng mga campaign materials, kasama na po yung iwas paputok. And we're looking at increasing the requirement for resources pa kung magkakaganyan. Kasi kailangan mong i-test po lahat ng mga papasok na yan na may mga injuries dahil maaring ooperahan yung iba, maaring i-confine yung iba, and this will require a lot of logistics again. But plus, burden to our healthcare workers. So sana nga po maiwasan po yung mga ganito.
Okay.
Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Vergeire. Ma'am, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight.
Thank you, ma'am.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you.
Okay,
Dapat
so
wala
Romy,
na talaga yung bukawi.
Mukhang,
Hindi essential yun.
mukhang tahimik na tahimik ang New Year's na to, di ba? Wala pa putok, pati yung torotot. Sabagay, yung ano na lang, yung ano ba tawag? Yung
Patel.
di ba? No, yung mga ipinapaikot, di ba?
so
Wow,
Pati karaoke, wala. Pati karaoke, wala. Pati karaoke, wala.
Ay, hindi naman bawal yun. Bawal ba yun?
oo, bawal ang karaoke.
Bawal yun.
Hindi, pagka lang may klase. Pagka lang may online classes. Pero pagka
Hindi, gathering pa rin yun eh. Enclosed area gathering yun eh. Tapos may singing ka.
Kung naman din sa pamilya, no? Di ba sabi nga nila, kung sino na lang kasama mo sa bahay, yun na lang ang kaparty mo.
Kakanta mo
Okay. Huwag niyo na ako pigilan.
Basta bawal ang torotot ha. Iwas torotot. That doesn't sound so good. Okay.
Okay. Iba yun. Okay.
And that's it for this Wednesday edition of The Chiefs. We hope to discuss it. We'll keep the conversation going. I'm Edling of One News.
I'm Ami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez of News 5.
I'm Robbie Alampay and we are One News.